Near, far, wherever you are.
One of the things I enjoy is when you sing, like you can get like maybe a bar or two into whatever you're singing, and then you just crack yourself up. It doesn't matter if you're trying to sing Celine Dion or a Vacation Bible School song. It's exactly.
Well, yeah. I'm listening to myself. And I'm like, that's amusing. You should stop now.
Greetings in Christ, everybody, and welcome to Cradle and Convert. I am Steve Green, Director of Holy Family Institute of Catholic Faith and Life, host of the Reasonably Rational YouTube podcast, and I am the Cradle Catholic.
And I'm Becky Green. I'm the Director of the Green Homeschooling Institute and everything else in our lives.
You got that right.
I'm the convert to the faith. Did you want to talk about technology? I was going to talk about Hen Solo.
You should talk about Hen Solo. I don't really want to talk about technology. So as those of you who are longtime listeners and perhaps now new viewers will remember, we 3+ years ago launched a chicken experiment where we got ourselves 8 little cute fuzzy little chicks. So 3+ years later, we are now down to 1 chicken.
It's this. I'm from the same little.
Yeah, we had the 8 chickens. So first of all, the 8 chickens all survived, which was. No one was more surprised about that than we were.
You mean survived into chickenhood?
Yeah, like actually made it into chickenhood. We're laying eggs. We're part, and then over time we had some dead chickens, and whichever green kid was responsible for going out and gathering eggs would come back in sort of.
It's usually Kateri.
A little bit traumatized, and there's a dead chicken. Or the worst was there's 3 dead chickens at one time. That was our biggest.
Catastrophic. Yeah.
So that was, we've become accustomed now to the circle of life, as the Lion King sings about, and we're down to 1 chicken. I'm gonna be honest, chickens look the same to me, and they share 1 brain between them. So it's very hard to distinguish which individual chicken has expired and which remains. So we got down to our last chicken, and I don't know, is this Marty Gold? Is this, I don't remember.
I don't remember their names.
Whatever the other names
They all had names when they were little baby chickens.
So I'm like, we're down to 1. I'm just going to rename this chicken Hen Solo. Because
it's a great name.
It is a great name.
That's a fantastic name.
It captures the essence of her situation.
She is living her best life right now, though.
Yeah, we were worried she's going to be all depressed and
well, we heard about depressed chickens. There was So she's just doing just fine. It's
happy to report.
Yeah, because with the first time a chicken died, the friend of the chicken, the one that was the same breed, lost its ever loving mind and was going crazy, and then another one was
attacking the other chickens.
Was she attacking the others, or the others attacking her? I don't remember. Honestly, it's all blending together.
There's an article on my Substack, Reasonably Rational, just to do a shameless plug here, about the death of that chicken and the chicken psychology that followed, especially on the part of our children, who basically took over the psychological care of the remaining chickens. Yeah. Right. So if you want to read about that, you can go to my Substack, Reasonably Rational, and read there. But at any rate,
Hen Solo. So she's just now I have like some compassion for her. I think it's because she's the one. So you're like, well, it's you. Like when she dies, we know, well, which one died. It was the last one died. Like that was Hen Solo. So I used to be kind of rough on him, like, you better lay eggs, ladies, you better get some eggs, and then they're kind of stupid, and I maybe said they were stupid, and the kids are like, don't call them stupid.
It's a lot of chicken poop we've cleaned up over the last 3+ years.
So sometimes I was talking trash, and then other times though, then there would be like that little bit of like, oh, look at you, I don't, I want you to be all right.
I would tell Kateri when she went out to gather eggs, because there was a couple times where they went on strike. They would just stop laying eggs.
Well, the coop needs to be cleaned.
Yeah, I get it. They were protesting their living/working conditions. It was like they formed like a feathered, unibrained labor union. Essentially, is what they did, and they went on strike a few times. So I would tell Kateri, I was like, hey, when you go out there, since you talk to the chickens anyway, like remind the chickens it's either eggs for breakfast or chicken for dinner. It's up to you.
She didn't like that.
She did not like that. No, she refused to communicate that to them because she felt that was really mean of me to put them under that kind of
pressure.
Dire ultimatum.
Like,
yeah,
that's
exactly.
really a lot of pressure.
Well, and what's interesting is so when the second to last chicken, who shall remain nameless because I have no idea which one it was, died. Hen Solo did go through like a mourning period because she didn't lay any eggs for like, I don't know, what, 4 or 5 days or so.
And we thought maybe because we were getting one a day.
Yeah.
So we thought the other one, that was the one. So now Hen Solo's here and she's not even giving us an egg.
Yeah.
So she's kind of pointless.
We're like, yeah, we're just caring for a depressed chicken who's in mourning now and not getting any more eggs.
Yeah.
And so, but then all of a sudden she like kind of back at it and get an egg every day.
She's kind of, she's shaking it off a little bit.
And Becky, who has suddenly flipped a switch to now caring about Hen Solo, our one chicken. Now Becky is like letting her roam free in the backyard and just giving her all kinds. I'm surprised Becky's not reading her bedtime stories at this point. She has really warmed to this whole chicken ownership thing just in time for our last chicken, who will probably die by the end of summer or something.
You know how I've said to you, like when Steve would tell me stories about, when he would back on Christmas Day once he went and ate it like Denny's alone or something. I don't know if you were into Denny's.
Oh, this is legendary.
And then you went hiking by yourself.
It was such a great day.
You don't ever, you didn't know that you don't ever go hiking by yourself.
It was dear
I'm
viewer.
just saying, I'm going to tell him real quick why you can then tell him if you want to, about, or you don't have to.
Or you could just stop talking. No. That's another option, Steve.
Well, you would tell me a story about how you ate alone. It's like, oh, that made me really very sad. Like I retroactive guilt for not having been there to have. Didn't know you yet, but just still, yeah. And so it makes me sad when I see someone eating by themselves, even if but I don't mind. Like if I go somewhere, I'm intentionally doing that, and I need to get away from everybody. That's why I'm going to sit by myself somewhere and maybe do a little work, and I don't want to be bothered. But I think of somebody by themselves sitting there, and I'm like, okay, they didn't choose that, and my heart. So that's kind of where I'm at with Hen Solo, as I see her out there, and I'm like, she's lonely.
You're really good at empathy, including for chickens, as it turns out, which no one would have guessed. But yeah, so just the thought of Hen Solo eating by herself makes her sad. Like, oh, we should do something nice for Hen Solo. Let's let her wander around the backyard and poop on our patio.
Well, I try to usher her off the patio.
Well,
so you did. You want to tell real quick, or do you not want to about your Christmas?
No, I just the back when I was single, there was a Christmas where I was not going to be going back home to Wisconsin because I had some work stuff there just wasn't a good window to fit a trip back home. So I was going to be here in Phoenix, and most of my other friends were going home or had other options, and I did have some options, but I chose intentionally. Mm-hmm. To just do an entire Christmas day by myself. It was absolutely delightful. So I am dear viewer, I am an introvert. I'm a professional extrovert. My whole professional life has been to be in front of people, teaching, presenting, etc. I'm an introvert. And so I did Christmas Day by myself. I got up early. I hiked Camelback Mountain.
Did you do midnight mass and you get up early, or did you do mass on Christmas Day, or did you
I think I actually did midnight mass, and then I woke up early on Christmas morning.
It's barely getting any sleep.
I didn't get a lot of sleep, but I was young and single. Who cares? So I hiked Camelback Mountain, which was great. Beautiful morning. When I got down to the base of Camelback Mountain, one of the local radio stations was handing out free copies of of the Nutcracker, like a CD of the Nutcracker,
which still have it.
We do, which I like very much, and which I play during the Christmas season. Then I went to Denny's and had a nice big breakfast, which I enjoyed very much by myself on Christmas Day. See, Becky's getting sad even just listening to it again. She knows how this turns out. And then I actually got to do this is only meaningful to Phoenicians. On Christmas Day, I forget what year it was, but I attended the final showing of the final movie that ever played at the Cine Capri. The Cine Capri was this famous, gigantic single-screen theater It was built in like the 1950s or something. It was kind of this iconic Phoenix landmark.
And the movie was
this destination thing. It was Titanic. So yes, dear listener, if you want to complete the picture, keep going, keep singing. That was really beautiful. For a second, I thought Celine Dion had snuck into the room and was sitting next to me. Celine, is that you? Or maybe it was Kate Winslet. I don't know. I mean, either way. But
it was the old grandma who drops her jewelry.
Right. Well, in case you haven't seen Titanic. But at any rate, yeah. So I went and I watched Titanic by myself on Christmas Day. Had myself popcorn and whatever other snack. It was so great. It was awesome. That day I still look back fondly on that Christmas Day all to myself. And now I'm married and have kids. So it's, Christmas Day is great, and we have our Christmas traditions and the kids and beautiful and presents. I love it. But just the fact that I got to do that one time, I love it. It was great.
Yeah, you could do that on any other day but Christmas Day.
So maybe I should take Hen Solo to the movies on Christmas. I think is where this all comes back together.
She can sing the song. We actually have a guest. He will not
I'm sure our viewers
are
grateful for that. Oh, thank goodness. Okay. Yes, today we're going to be talking to J.D. Flynn. J.D. is, as many of you will probably know, he is the founder and executive editor of The Pillar, which is a Catholic news service that he and Ed Condon and some others run. But it's a real, if you're not a subscriber to The Pillar, look up The Pillar and subscribe. It's a great news source. They write great stuff, lots of entertaining stuff too. But it's a good how to kind of keep track of the comings and goings in the church. However, what we're actually going to be talking to JD about today is he wrote the foreword to a really, really cool book. Written actually, it's a series of essays and presentations by Pier Battista Cardinal Pizzaballa. Yes, that is his name. He is the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. So essentially, he's the Archbishop of Jerusalem, like the church in Jerusalem. And the title of the book is The Heart of All Nations. It's out from Ignatius Press. So I'm sure you can get it online, but you can also get it directly from Ignatius. JD wrote the foreword. He's kind of doing the press for it. So we're going to chat with him about The Heart of All Nations, which is a glimpse at the life of Christians in Jerusalem and some of the persecutions they face, but also a story of great hope and beauty as the Christians there in the heart of Christendom kind of continue to be witnesses to the world. So stay where we are. We'll be right back with J.D. Flynn here on Cradle and Convert. Welcome back to Cradle and Convert. I am Steve Green, the Cradle Catholic, and my lovely wife, Becky, the Convert. We're thrilled to welcome to the program for the first time the one and only J.D. Flynn. Of course, many of you will know him from his work as the founding and executive editor of The Pillar and his great commentary and journalism on all things Catholic worldwide, the great job that he and his team there do. But he's also written the foreword to a really wonderful new book, a collection of presentations from Cardinal Pizzaballa, Pier Battista Cardinal Pizzaballa, to say it the proper, correct Catholic way, where Cardinal somehow becomes a guy's middle name, who is, of course, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. So, JD, welcome to Cradle and Convert. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here.
So, I want to begin, since this is your first time on the program here, whichever program it is that we're hosting currently. I'd love to have you just give a little bit of a brief autobiography of J.D. Flynn. Introduce yourself to the folks for anyone who might not be familiar, a little background where you come from and how you came to be doing the good stuff that you're doing now with The Pillar.
Sure, yeah, glad to. I am by training a canon lawyer. I have graduate degrees in theology and in canon law, which is internal disciplinary norms and laws of the Catholic Church. And in that context, I worked for the early part of my career as a canon lawyer in diocesan ministry. So that means doing both marriage work and in my case, also working in kind of the administrative life of the church, advising bishops on how canon law governs the property and financial decisions of the church, personnel decisions of the church, and other leadership decisions that bishops are called to make. So I spent the early part of my career, more than a decade, working in administrative canonical positions in a couple of dioceses, and serving also as a professor of canon law in seminaries, which is pretty much the only place where you've got professors of canon law, I suppose. And and then made a shift in 2018. I began working as the editor-in-chief of Catholic News Agency, which is the daily newswire service of EWTN News. And then in 2021, with a partner, I launched The Pillar, which is a kind of Catholic media project that's focused on a couple of things, one of which is public accountability in the life of the church, and one of which is just providing an informed reporting, informed and informing reporting for, especially for people who kind of work in and around the church. We always say in a certain way that our target audience is your parish priest, and the things that he needs to know about what the Bishops' Conference is doing and what's happening in Rome, and how those things kind of trickle down into his ordinary life of leadership in the life of the church. So we've been doing Pillar now for I guess for about 5 years, and I haven't missed a mortgage payment, so by that metric, it's doing okay. We hope that it's a service to the church, and of course, there are always ways that it can continue to grow in that way. But it's been a gift for me to do. I have 3 children. I've been married for I just celebrated my 20th wedding anniversary in January. I've been married for 20 years. I have 3 children. My son Max is 14. My daughter Pia is 13, and my son Daniel is just had his 9th birthday. Let's see what else. I'm really not here to talk about me. In a certain way, I'm here to talk about this great and important book, The Heart of All Nations, which is, as you say, kind of a collection of essays and exhortations and reflections from Cardinal Pizzaballa, who has a funny title. He's the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, which basically means he's the Archbishop of the diocese, which encompasses Latin Catholics, so Roman Catholics in Israel, in Palestine, and in kind of parts of the countries adjacent to that as well. He's a Franciscan friar who has a career, an academic career as a biblical theologian, and began working in the Holy Land more than 20 years ago in 1999. Kind of the Franciscans, because of really the desire of St. Francis himself, have long had a role in the Holy Land of caring for some of the most sacred sites of Christian history, and Cardinal Pizzaballa had an important role in that as the custos of the sacred sites of the Holy Land, which basically means the guy who was charged with overseeing kind of those things. And then in 2020, he became the Patriarch of Jerusalem, the Archbishop of that diocese, and soon after became a cardinal. A lot of people heard of Cardinal Pizzaballa. He rose to prominence because after the acts of terror on October 7th, 2023, when Israeli and American citizens and others were taken into the Gaza Strip as hostages by Hamas, Cardinal Pizzaballa rather famously offered to exchange himself for the hostages, and he kind of was flung onto the global stage because of that. And if you know anything about Cardinal Pizzaballa, it wasn't an empty gesture. He was really intentional about that, and he was speaking to people he had worked among for more than 20 years and understanding what was important to them and why it was important to them. He also offered to exchange a great deal of property, which was owned by his diocese, basically as much ecclesiastical property as he could, for hostages, and especially for children who are being held by Hamas. And so I think people were inspired by that. He seemed to exemplify really this authentically Christian desire, and of course historically Christian desire, to offer himself as a ransom for those who had been detained in imitation of Christ on the cross ultimately. And because of that, I think Cardinal Pizzaballa has become someone who has captured the attention of Catholics, and I think been inspirational to Catholics. Soon after that, or not too long after that, we had a conclave after the death of Pope Francis, and it was because of the gravitas of Cardinal Pizzaballa and the way in which I think for many people he seemed to exhibit real and authentic holiness during the time of the Hamas-Israel war. He was widely regarded as a front runner to be elected pope. He was an elected pope, but I think God clearly had other plans. But I think he continues to be someone whose witness has been, I think, an important witness for Catholics around the world over these past 5 years or so. And what's extraordinary about his book, Heart of All Nations, is it kind of grounds the witness that he's given in his theological view and, his anthropological view, his sense of the place of the Holy Land itself, and then his deep knowledge of Scripture and his Franciscan charism and spirituality. So it's a good and important and awesome book, and I think one that really helps all of us to understand well somebody who most of us have been really impressed by over the past couple of years, and to give us a sense. He says it's a book about the Holy Land as the heart of all nations, but I think it's the kind of book that gives us a sense of his heart as well.
Can you tell us a little bit about just in general, I guess even for you, you're asked to write the forward, you're doing a lot of the publicity for the book. Was there, because I regrettably, as probably someone who is similar to many other practicing Catholics in the United States, the Holy Land is so far away in so many ways, and the experience of Catholics there, and the Christian experience amidst all of the turmoil that we are aware of, kind of just tangentially through how the media publicizes it and what we're able to get, but that heart of where our Holy Land is the roots of our own faith, and what that experience is like present day is just foreign to us. Was this kind of journey for you something? Obviously you write for the Pillar, that is your publication, but so you're probably much more tapped into it, but can you talk to us about just kind of the experience of learning about that, and what stands out? What is something that we as American Catholics really ought to have a better understanding of?
Yeah, great question. I think it's important to know, Christians are a minority presence in the Holy Land, and vanishingly so. And Christians in the Holy Land, in Israel and Palestine, face all kinds of marginalization and ostracization from their neighbors, really on all fronts. In the past couple of years, and I've been privileged because we've been able to cover this. In Israel, Christians have faced acts of violence by Israeli citizens, being spat upon in the street, being beaten in some cases, and the politics of that are complicated. But in part, it's because Christians are seen to represent. Christians are often perceived to be allied with Hamas and the Palestinian movement, and the reason for that perception is because the majority of Christians in the Holy Land are Palestinians or Arabs, and have this dual kind of identity of Christian identity, and then their ethnic and national identity, and they're neither fish nor fowl, sort of in any camp. In Israel, they're not Jews or Muslims, and they're not wholly Israelis, but they're not sort of wholly accepted in Muslim territories as being Muslims either. And so Christians are, I think, maybe in a way that is true of Christians in the Holy Land for all of history, or for most of history at least. Christians aim in that part of the world to be 11 and to be a witness to the gospel, but they do so kind of at all the friction points of the geopolitical issues of the place. Palestinian Christians suffer the same consequences of Israel's approach to governing places like the Gaza Strip that anyone else who suffers. So Palestinian Christians are themselves without clean water or electricity or access to food and medicine because of Israel's policies with regard to the Gaza Strip. And at the same time, those Palestinian Christians are not in support necessarily of the approach of Hamas, and certainly not in support by and large of the violence perpetrated by Hamas and other Palestinian nationalists. And so there's this being finding it very difficult for Christians in the Holy Land to find solidarity among their neighbors. And that actually is the part that's incumbent upon us, is, whenever we think about persecuted Christians, and I think it's fair to say that the Christians of the Holy Land are persecuted Christians, whenever we think about persecuted Christians, when we think about Catholics who live in places like the Holy Land or Nigeria or the Democratic Republic of Congo or China, who are facing systematic violence and persecution in many cases, or marginalization and discrimination. In northern India, for example, where Christians are beaten by Hindu nationalists regularly and excluded from civil office and participation in public life, where Christians have a difficult time going to school and difficult time finding employment. What I found remarkable about the Christians in those places is I've had the privilege of getting to know them people from all over the world, from persecuted Christian minorities. And if you talk to a dad who is living the Christian life in a place like that, he has the same concerns as me and my friends do. You know, he wants to raise his children in the faith, and you know, he wants to figure out what it means to lead his family in the Christian life and in a modernizing world. And he wants his life to be kind of animated and structured by the church's liturgical life. And he probably struggles with the same sins that I struggle with, and maybe he has some of the same victories that I have. But the commonality of the Christian life, especially of Catholic life, is so extraordinary that what I find is when you meet a Christian from a Catholic who's living the Christian life from a totally different place in the world and who's facing extraordinary persecution, you find a fast friendship because you have all these things that are the real tangible stuff of life in common with each other. You're formed with the same worldview. And of course, we're extremely, extremely privileged in this country. The things that we think about as sort of persecution or discrimination against Christians in this country are a straw as compared to what people face in other parts of the world. And we live far more comfortably, you know, even those of us who feel like we're just getting by, and you know, that's most of us, but we live far more comfortably than do Christians in many parts of the world. And so, you know, by those things, we're insulated by many of the sufferings that form faith and form character for people in other parts of the world. But still, we can have a kind of solidarity with them, and we can experience that. And so I think for us to remember that we're unified by by our faith, by our common baptism, by the sacramental life, by the creed, far more than we're unified by the other kind of factors in our life. I think it's unusual to say, but it's just true. It's just practically true that in the things that matter most, we have more in common with our brothers and sisters, Palestinian Catholics, or Catholics living in Israel, or Catholics living in northern Nigeria, or Catholics living in India or China, than we do with, you know, our neighbors who don't go to mass and who kind of embrace a secular worldview. Like, all the things that matter are the things that connect us. And so just remembering that this Catholic communion is so much stronger and so much more pervasive than the other things which might unite us, including culture, I think is really important. And that's one of the things that Pizzaballa, I think, gets to in the book, because he grounds all of that. He grounds that in a kind of temporal reality for the Christians of his place. He says, look, it's not only that we're grounded with the Catholic community of this place and other places in the world, but we walk the streets that Jesus walked. We're bound to the Christians of other times. And we have something in common with those Christians of other times who have been in and from this place, who can say, in a place like Capernaum, one of these houses was the houses of the Lord. I mean, that's just mind-blowing, right? I mean, like, just mind-blowing for us, because we don't have anything in this country that's older than a couple hundred years, and we certainly don't have anything that the Lord walked on, or where the Lord lived, or the sunset that the Lord would have watched. And so he can, I think, make a point for all of us by talking specifically to Christians of the Holy Land about the way in which we're bound to one another by baptism, but we're also bound across time to those who share in that one baptism.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Sorry, can you give me 1 second? My wife is supposed to be keeping my kids out of here.
We've had two. Our last two episodes.
We just call that we just call that bonus content, JD.
Hi, Max. This is my son, Max. He likes to say hello to people. Come over here.
Hi, Max. Good to see you, buddy.
Thanks for jumping in.
Now go find Mom, yes? We'll see.
Oh, beautiful.
Okay, go find Mom. Sorry about that.
That's fine. No, literally, the last two episodes we've done, we've had one child, different child, each time come in. Despite the, hey everyone, Mom and Dad are gonna go record.
Right.
One of them might be 19 years old. Yes. So I'm not sure exactly what excuse is going to be employed there. Bonus content, awesome, yes. Love it. Well, good to see Max.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would echo Becky's sentiments in saying I'm regrettably ignorant about the reality of life on the ground for Christians in the Holy Land, which is why Cardinal Pizzaballa's book is actually so helpful. But I do have some connection to it. So my cousin, Father Anthony Giambroni, is a Dominican there at the Col Biblique. He's been, I think, 10 or so years. He was deputy director for a while. We've had the opportunity to have him on the show a few times, and he's shared some of just the reality of what life is like on the ground in Jerusalem for Christians. But one of the things that an observation he made. We were talking to him. He actually got stuck in the United States. He was here for some kind of Dominican gathering, and then stayed over to have a little minor medical procedure done here because they wanted him to do it here rather than back in Jerusalem.
Sure.
And then the whole October 7th attacks happened. So he was actually stuck here and couldn't get back to Jerusalem. So while he was here, we chatted with him, and I asked him, I said, so is there a point with all of this turmoil and the danger and where you just leave, like the Dominicans just, pull up stakes and get out of there and then come back later? And he said, that's not an option. He said, if we were to leave, the Akol would be annexed probably immediately by the Israelis. It's the only way that we can remain there is to remain there permanently. There's no option to go and, hey, we'll come back when things are safe. What impressed me there, and then I picked up kind of sort of some of this thread too in Cardinal Pizzaballa's work, and actually in some of the stuff that you've written about the Holy Land as well. As the world kind of watches with varying degrees of interest, but kind of watches this whole Israeli-Palestinian thing, and how is this conflict going to be resolved? Is it going to be resolved? Will it be a two-state solution or some kind of compromise, etc.? The one group who is there and has been there from the very beginning, who is never mentioned in any of the calculations about how this might finally play out. In other words, the group that doesn't seem to have any political voice or political pull or a place at the table for those negotiations are the Christians in the Holy Land. Almost kind of a non-entity politically, which means, and again, to the point of what Father Anthony was saying, it kind of sounds like, in a sense, their fate hangs in the balance. Just speak a little bit maybe to that reality, and from Cardinal Pizzaballa's perspective then, as the one who's been entrusted with the care of the Catholic Christians there, and in some broader sense maybe Christians in general. What does that kind of mean for Christians, and how are they supposed to live in that reality?
One of the things that Pizzaballa talks about, I think, a lot as he's talking to Christians in the Holy Land is the beatitude obligation of being peacemakers. And, we sort of think about that as like, well, if my kids are fighting, I'll tell them to knock it off or something like that. But he's talking about something much more specific, which I think is them doing the kinds of things that he's done, which is to insert himself sacrificially into this conversation, not just to insert himself into this conversation and to say, hey, I'd like to host a dialogue. Why doesn't everyone come to sit down at the table? But to offer to be a peacemaker by the kind of arresting and haunting witness of the incarnation, that he calls all these Christians to, which is to say, in as much as we're here, the way that we might sow peace is to offer our lives for it, and to offer our lives as a servant, right? And that's, and the way that plays out, again, is not peacemakers who have power. Now, the Holy See has tried, and I think will continue to try, to use its leverage on the international front to kind of bring people to the table as often as she can, and has tried to do that with Israel and Hamas when she can as well. But I think for ordinary Christians, what Pizzaballa is proposing is something far more demanding, which is we are here and we might be 11 and be peacemakers by the witness of death to ourselves, that not self-assertion, but self-surrender and self-gift. And especially that self-gift, which is what he offered to make of himself. I think the hope is that, and he talks about this in the book, the hope is that it's so striking. The cross is not as scandalous to us as it ought to be because it's so familiar to us. But I think, strangely, in the place of the cross itself, in a society which is not Christian, the cross is perhaps all the more scandalous because it is counterintuitive that I would offer my life in surrender for others. And so that's what he proposes. And what I like about that, and he proposes that Christians be thinking about ways that they can do that in their daily life. And there's all this tension in terms of like territorial settlers and their desire to take possession of territory, which has been claimed by others, or which is the historic homeland of others, Israeli settlers outside of the defined territory of Israel, who try to like create these homes and then get persuade the IDF to come and defend those homes and effectively annex other people's territory into Israel. And that creates all of this, compounds all of this tension. And Pizzaballa's question is, can we stand in the middle offering our lives as a ransom. And what I really like about that is that it strikes me as exactly what St. Francis himself wanted to do in the Holy Land. Christians in the time of St. Francis, Christians were being kidnapped uh, uh, by Muslim forces in and around the Holy Land, and European Christians were being kidnapped on the Mediterranean and being taken into captivity and things like this. And Francis goes unarmed and disarmingly to be in the presence of the Sultan and to offer himself in whatever way he can. And he sees that as this sort of fundamental element of the Franciscan mission. I think we kind of tend to lose it a little bit as like Francis the Lost Years or something like that when he wasn't putting out any cool albums. But for him, this huge and important part of his life when he's nearly blind and suffering from all these physical infirmities is to get to the Holy Land and to be in the presence of the Sultan, not with a real plan, except that he might give witness. Francis is always this alter Christus, and that he might give witness to the kind of radical audacity of Christ to offer himself. And it doesn't seem that he's very successful, and he eventually comes back and all of this. But it seems to me that the Franciscan charism has been since then to continue, like, to just sort of model and allow the cross to reverberate in that place. And I think that's what Pizzaballa is getting at with regard to what he's saying to Christians there.
Having not again followed real closely, although I do remember the offering, and then you said it was not just a gesture. This was obviously not a stunt. This was legitimate Christian expression of self-sacrifice as presented to those who could have taken him up on it. Was there ever any serious consideration of that, or was it simply like he knows as a Catholic, as a Christian, as a leader, this is something he's got to try if he can at all help those?
Yeah, we don't know. It would have been strategically smart, actually, right? I mean, like, I to say, but it would have been strategically smart because a high-profile prisoner puts ongoing international pressure on the situation. So, I have no idea what I don't think any of us have any idea what the internal dialogue of Hamas was at that point or anything like that. But I know it was certainly offered in sincerity, and he was ready to go. And friends of mine who are close to him say he had a bag. He had a bag ready in the event that he would be allowed to take a bag, but he was willing to go if he wasn't allowed to take a bag as well. Which, like, when I think Cardinal Pizzaballa, if I remember correctly, I want to say that he's in his early 60s, but if he's anything like me, that means you already have, like, to take a bunch of prescriptions with you practically anywhere you go. You know what I mean? And he was willing to sort of willing to defy even those ongoing questions about health and things like that. And really, the interesting thing about it would have been not only that it would have, set free the captives who had been taken by Hamas, but it also would have called attention at the same time, and perhaps it cuts with its double-edged sword, because it also would have called attention at the same time to the conditions of people who are living in the Gaza Strip, which are which have been described frequently by international observers as inconsistent with human dignity. So
yeah. So the title, JD, the Heart of All Nations, is one of the reference that Cardinal Pizzaballa uses for Jerusalem, for the Holy Land. He also talks about it as the Mother Church. I thought both of those titles are interesting. That they at least for me personally speak to a kind of a centrality and a reality. You're talking earlier about just kind of the beautiful universality of the church, even among persecuted and non-persecuted Christians whose daily lives have overlap and similarity on a human level, but on a cultural or experiential level, they would be very different. Just lean into those two titles, which both I think are fascinating and both I think revelatory of kind of some of the deeper realities of just how significant and special Jerusalem is, not just for Christians, not just for the church, but really for the world.
Yeah, Heart of All Nations, of course, I think is a biblical reference, but I'll be darned if I can recall offhand where it comes from. But it does remind me, of the conception that the Israelites had in the time before the Lord's incarnation, of Israel as the navel of the earth, or Jerusalem as the navel of the earth, the center of the earth, by which, and this image of navel is intentional, that like the means by which the earth is sustained through the presence of God, and in the same manner as kind of being attached to a mother by an umbilical cord. So there's this ancient historic sense of Israel as a central locus of grace. And I think in the church today, oftentimes we can rightly think about Rome because Rome is the see of Peter, and Rome is the place from which Christianity spread to so many other parts of the world, and we have these historic things there, and so we want to go on pilgrimage to Rome and see them and feel in close proximity to Peter and all of those things. But at the same time that Rome is the see of Peter, and rightly therefore in a certain way the center of the church for us, it's all the more true that the places where the Lord lived and died and was resurrected and ascended into heaven, where the incarnation was announced to Mary at the time of the Annunciation. Now, sure, plenty of people will point out, well, you can see that in Italy too if you go to Loreto. But apart from the Italian version, the ground upon which the Holy House at Loreto once sat is there.
Before angels got involved.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. The Italians have done a masterful job of reminding us that they've got all the stuff too. But there's
brand for the Italians.
Yeah, right. But there's no way not to see that that Jerusalem. Gosh, I mean, the whole of the Gospel of John is what I love about the structure of the Gospel of John is that the whole thing is structured towards Jerusalem. That Jesus is making this long pilgrimage himself to Jerusalem, and we're invited into it because the death and resurrection of Jesus is the fulfillment of the promises of the covenant, and God chose the people of Israel to reveal Himself, and then gave us the grace of being grafted onto the people of Israel. And we don't I think spend enough time thinking about, most of us, myself included, don't spend enough time thinking about what it means really that the church is the new Israel, and that we're kind of grafted onto the tree of Jesse. But if we do, then we realize that God has chosen this place in a way that's absolutely mysterious to reveal Himself through the soil of the place. I mean, through the soil of the place, in a way that doesn't compare to anything else which has happened in the world. And then the heart of all nations piece, that's true on a theological level in the way that we're talking about, but I think it's also true on a more human level. So much of what happens in the world, we can, I think, underestimate the importance of faith as a driving force of so much of what happens in the world. But so many of the clashes of culture which we now deal with in terms of questions about global migration and things like this are as much about religious perspectives and the cultures which emanate from them as anything else. Ratzinger talks about the idea that culture is just the antecedent of cult, that we form our culture around the things which we worship. And so many of the challenges that Europe is facing right now are fundamentally religious challenges, and so many of the ways that we understand ourselves as American are fundamentally religious in nature, and the challenges that we face are about the perspective of faith again, over and against a sort of increasing mode of secularization and post-Christian America. But to the extent that faith is at the center of things far more than we tend to give it credit for, or faiths are at the center of things far more than we tend to give them credit for, Jerusalem, which is the locus of, as Francis liked to say, the great Abrahamic religions, but the locus of these three faiths which have animated so much of global history and continue to animate so much of global politics and culture and even economy. There's a way in which perhaps the world revolves around Jerusalem more than we tend to think it does.
It's fascinating to actually think about, as I was listening to you, when you recognize that Christians in some ways are homeless in their home.
Yeah.
And I'm going to switch metaphors here, but just bear with me. With the whole point of it being the heart, it's almost like it's barely staying alive, and yet it is exactly the thing that's keeping Christianity alive, because it's the roots. You wonder why there hasn't been, over the 2,000 plus years, a stronger, why isn't Christianity most strong where it started?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a fascinating question too. There's something there about, when you were saying that, I was just thinking maybe it's good that foxes have dens and those particular Christians have, in a metaphorical sense at least, no place to lay their head, because they can all the more clearly point to us the reality of Christ's life and the life that we ourselves should live. We can get way too, I think we can get way too comfortable, sort of. Well, let me approach this in a different way. I love some of the early ancient Christian letters, which describe Christians as, some of the early ancient descriptions of Christians written by others, which describe Christians as really belonging to no place except a place beyond, a heavenly place, that being pilgrims in this world. And I think we can get way too comfortable thinking about Christianity and this as this sort of fixed stasis of the place in which we live, without an idea that, or even instrumentalizing Christianity as the force which might bring peace to our nation or something like that, instead of thinking about the gospel as the thing which makes us pilgrims here and going somewhere beyond. And so I think it's probably very beautiful that the Christians of the Holy Land, in a particular way, their status seems so much more transitory in a way, or so much more unfixed, because it points us to Christ and then to our own reality. Now that's hard for them. I remember talking with an Iraqi bishop, a Chaldean bishop, a couple of years ago. He was the Archbishop of Mosul, which is one of the most ancient Christian communities on the world, or had been one of the most ancient Christian communities in the world. There have been Christians in Mosul. The Mass had been offered in Mosul since the 1st century after Christ's ascension, continuously. It's an extraordinary thing. But he had been Archbishop of Mosul until he told me that there weren't any Christians, there weren't any sheep over whom he could be the shepherd anymore, that everyone had been exiled. The Christian population had gone from more than 100,000 to being measured in the hundreds, these few families who were hanging on. And this bishop eventually went into exile. And part of the reason he went into exile is he wanted to give permission to these families who were hanging on to do the same if they needed to. That, in other words, they felt that they must stay, and he wanted them to know in part that it was okay to put the safety of their children ahead of sort of keeping the sanctuary candle lit. And so, like, I don't know, there's something beautiful about these ancient Christian communities, and there's something beautiful about the shallowness of the roots they seem to have in the soil. It's ancient historical soil, but which can be eradicated very, very quickly. And that's probably a reminder for us of where any of us are, save for grace. Newman talked a lot about us being, just one day away from being utterly decimated, absent grace, which holds at bay our decimation. And that's perhaps the status of those Christian communities, and there's something good and beautiful there. I know the Japanese author Shishako Endo would always ask, who wrote that great book Silence, and has some other really very beautiful novels on Christianity, but his fundamental question was whether Christianity could take root in the rocky soil of Japan. And, which seemed to him to be particularly unfertile soil and thin soil for the gospel. And yet one of his theses was how important it was that Christians continue to try to plant seeds in that rocky soil without despair, without giving up, or without the idea that this just won't be a Christian part of the world, that every part of the world ought to be a Christian part of the world, that every knee should bow, and that rocky soil requires, if nothing else, just more persistence. And so perhaps there's something in the witness of those Christians about the importance of persistence. And those of us who seem to live, I guess, in more fertile soil or deeper soil, maybe are called to more courage, that if we have better soil, we ought to be all the more adamant about planting seeds in a place where the harvest might be greater.
Yeah. Gosh, that's a great point. A great perspective on that. JD, and we're talking to JD Flynn, founder and executive editor of The Pillar. He's written the foreword to a great new book, a collection of essays and presentations by Cardinal Pizzaballa, Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. I want to pivot to the Pillar in a second, but maybe just to kind of put a bow on the Heart of All Nations on this book. What in your estimation would be kind of Cardinal Pizzaballa's hope for folks who read the book as takeaways? What do you think he would like them to take away? Get a copy and read and kind of immerse themselves in his reflections on the Holy Land.
I think a sense of solidarity with Christians of the Holy Land would be a big and important one. Another one I think would be an awareness, calling to mind for all of us. I mean, the theme that he returns to all the time is calling to mind for all of us the reality of Christ the man, and asking and going deeper, if we don't live in the Holy Land, the good news is we have the Holy Land kind of in the form of divine revelation right there on our shelf in sacred scripture. And I think a big part of the book is an invitation to go deeper into sacred scripture, deeper into the Gospels, so that we might know Christ the man all the more and be transformed by him. And then from transformation to him to take up, I'm struck especially by this very Franciscan witness of sort of taking up the Beatitudes as a mode of evangelization, that we would live in a public and obvious way, in lives which are animated by the Beatitudes and from which flow the fruits of the Spirit, and that we would trust in God. We can get into a very programmatic idea about what evangelization is. It's super easy because we're Americans and we like to sort of think, well, the best way to solve a problem is to make a strategic plan and then throw money at that strategic plan and then it will be solved. And sometimes, I think there are some evangelical initiatives in the United States that could not be replicated anywhere else because we tend to think about things in these ways. But I also think there's a call to something which is far more dependent on providence and far more trusting of providence, right? That I will live as the Lord calls me to and allow myself to be transformed in grace and do that in a way which is not, in which I share that life with other people, the life of a person who's animated by Jesus Christ, and have confidence in the Holy Spirit that will be in itself efficacious and transformational. And it seems to me that's the kind of evangelization that he's calling us to. There's something just helpful for us there, a reminder that, as it were, a reminder that every good and perfect gift comes from God, a reminder that we can't force these things, and we can't expect that evangelization is sort of the mode of A plus B equals C, and if we have enough A's and enough B's, we'll get there. But rather that we have, as Pascal says, the dignity of causality to participate in God's the unfolding of the economy of salvation. But that ultimately it's a work of God, which He's invited us into by virtue of our baptism. I think that's the thing He's really driving out or witnessing.
Yeah, excellent.
So everybody should buy the book. It's a great book. And I just say, I wrote the foreword and I got a little stipend for writing the foreword, but I'm pitching the book. I don't get a royalty from the book, so it's a genuine pitch. You can tell if you're cynical like me and you look for the angle. I don't have an angle here. I just really like it, and I thought it was good, so people should buy it. Yeah.
Well, okay, so that yes,
I'm glad I don't get a royalty because it lets me pitch it feeling better about myself.
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean?
It's
pure as the driven soul.
Well,
exactly. So it is the heart of all nations, faith and hope in the Holy Land, out from Ignatius, and you've written the foreword. But you are already working. Thank you. Yes, we see the picture.
There it is.
I can never tell
Here.
at what depth the camera.
I'll do mine
there
too.
We go.
There we go. Book to book.
Everyone,
We
hold
each
up
have a
your
copy. I'm glad.
viewers. If you already have a copy, hold yours up too.
But regarding the pillar, actually, when you introduced yourself at the very beginning, you said you were trained as a canon lawyer and you had worked in diocesan administration for many years before you founded the pillar. How does one discern to enter that type of field? How did that? Not to open up a big can of worms here, I know.
No, it's just I started doing that stuff when I was about 15 years old, so discern hardly feels the appropriate.
Okay, how did you during your adolescence?
Yeah, no, I
decide?
became a canonist in very practical ways. I studied at Steubenville. I did my undergrad work at Steubenville, and then I did a master's in theology at Steubenville. And if I'm honest, I did a master's in theology at Steubenville because my girlfriend still had a year left before she finished, and I wanted to hang around, so I figured I might as well get another degree.
The Lord works in mysterious
right,
ways.
exactly. That's right.
Okay, that works.
So she's my now wife, so it worked out just fine.
Good.
But
So that was the right move.
if I hung around for some other girl, she might not want me to tell the story, But but then I loved the study of theology, and it was a great grace to study theology there at Steubenville under some really beautiful disciples of Jesus Christ. And then I was sort of thinking about what I would do next, so I thought I would get a PhD in theology and be a teacher and that sort of thing, and then. I thought, well, also, though, I would like to be able to feed my family, so maybe that's not the path. And although many people do it sacrificially, I was not sure, and even then you could tell what the diminishing academic job market would do and all of those things. And so I thought I'd do what everybody does after they finish studying theology, and then they realize they need to get a couple of bucks, which is I thought I'd go to law school. And as I was kind of getting ready to take the LSAT and stuff like that, my spiritual director said to me, well, there's a kind of a via media, a middle way there where you can continue doing something theological, study law and serve the church. And it'll be great because you'll have all the debt of ordinary law school and all the salary of a DRE. And I thought, well, that's the one for me. I'll take it. So that sounds like a plan. So, in the United States, there's one school of canon law. There's one canon law school. It's at the Catholic University of America, and there's one in Canada and a handful in Rome, and then a few scattered around the world. But at that time, there weren't very many lay people studying canon law at all. It was very uncommon at various times after the Reformation. After the Reformation, it became increasingly less common to see lay people be canon lawyers. Before the Reformation, actually, it was quite common, but after the Reformation, for a variety of reasons, it became less common to see lay people be canon lawyers. And by the time of the Second Vatican Council and then the promulgation of the 1983 Code of Canon Law, it was vanishingly rare to see lay canon lawyers. But there was a desire at that time to see lay people in that work for a couple of reasons. One is that all of us who are baptized are called to serve the church and to serve the kingdom in real and practical ways, and being a canonist is a good way to serve the kingdom in a real and practical way. And two, there's just a greater awareness of kind of lay ministry as a consequence of the charisms of baptism. And also, in recent decades, as there have been fewer and fewer priests, there's an idea like, well, if you don't need holy orders to do this thing, maybe we should have people who don't have holy orders do this thing. So there's just been a practical awareness at the same time. So when I went to canon law school, there were a couple of lay people studying at that time, but for the most part, it was clerics and some religious, which was a great gift for me because I got to form all these friendships with these extraordinary clerics. I'm reaching a weird age now because some of my canon law school classmates are becoming bishops. And I'm still coaching Little League, so it feels like we're just in very different places in our life, So
this is the life I chose.
Right, exactly. I'm kissing their rings, and I can't decide whether I mean it or I'm making fun of them, But I'm doing it anyway. I studied canon law, and then and really, I'm so grateful for that because canon law is. Like any kind of studying law often gives you a sort of comprehensive and systematic way of looking at a society. You know what I mean? That you can sort of think about it in as an organic whole, and you can think about how the pieces relate to the whole, and what a just ordering of those things is. That's the aim of law, is to think about the just ordering of relationships. And so, law in the church gives you this sort of comprehensive overview of the just ordering of relationships in various ways. And I'm very grateful for that, and how the sacraments fit into that, and all of that. And then I had the great gift. I was hired by the Archdiocese of Denver, and I had the great gift of working for Archbishop Charles Chaput, who is, I think, one of the most important churchmen in the United States of the last 100 years at least, if not in our entire history. And Archbishop Chaput was very kind to me and became a very good friend, and gave me lots of opportunities to do lots of interesting things canonically. And so I did that and worked for him and learned just a lot from him. Learned a lot from him about what it means to be a Christian, and what it means to be a man of faith, and then a churchman in a certain way. I think Archbishop Chaput is kind of a consummate churchman, and at the same time, kind of radically a disciple, balancing those things in tension with each other. My friend Bishop Conley, who was the auxiliary bishop of Denver, became the bishop of Lincoln, Nebraska, and he invited me to go with him there to Lincoln, Nebraska. So he'd have a canon lawyer he knew and a pal around, I guess, too, a little bit. And so I was very grateful to be invited to go there and to serve the Diocese of Lincoln for 6 years, or 7 years, and really to help Bishop Conley to do some of the things that he's doing in his ministry, which are really great and beautiful. And then in 2017, I thought that I needed a break from chancery work. I had been doing it then for quite some time, and priests who go to work in the chancery have the luxury of getting rotated out to then be in a parish, you know what I mean? And I could see that there was no rotation out for me on the horizon, and yet the work can be draining in its own way. And if your listeners work in chancery, they know what I mean. And so I was invited by EWTN to go work at Catholic News Agency, and I remember talking with Bishop Conley and just sort of saying, I need a break from the chancery and when it was time and all of these things. It was hard for me because Bishop Conley's like a brother to me, and I love him and respect him so much. And also it's hard. It's when you're in the room, it's kind of hard to go and do something else, when you get to see someone who's great doing great things every day. And so he was asking me, we were talking about some plans that we had of things we were going to do in the diocese and all of this. And he said, well, well, why now? Why now when we have some plans and all of this, and why is it time? And I said, Bishop, I need a break from chancery work. I need to do something that's outside of the chancery. Wouldn't it be nice, Bishop, to be outside of the chancery? And I remember he looked out the window, and you can kind of see the cathedral school from his office window, and the cathedral school children were leaving the school and walking home. And it was a beautiful day out. And I said, wouldn't it be nice, Bishop, to be outside of the chancery for a little while? And he looks and he says, yeah, that'd be really nice, actually. But but I got to go out of the chancery. He didn't. And so I worked there. And then in 2018, of course, we had in the Church in the United States the great scandal of Theodore McCarrick and the things which came after it, and the Pennsylvania grand jury report, and all of that, this unfolding of cataclysm. And in that, I think I discerned what God had been doing all along, because the church had need of media coverage that understood what these things were that were happening, and how the church was going to handle them, and how the church should have handled them. And I had spent more than a decade working in what we call priest personnel, these kind disciplinary cases. They become something of a focus for me, actually. And so it was the kind of work that I did. And I had recently hired another canon lawyer to work with us at CNA, and the kind of stuff he did. And he had a different specialization than I did, and those two specializations kind of complemented each other. And we found that we were in a position where we were able to help the church, I hope, make sense of what was happening, and what should have happened, and what could happen, what ought to happen. And that felt like, okay, I can see the path of providence here, which I had not seen at all. And so we did that, and then in 2021, the beginning of 2021, we decided to kind of do it on our own in a certain way. We saw in the immediate aftermath of 2018, the Pope was calling for public accountability in the church, and the importance of that, and the importance of media being able to assist the church in telling the truth, and in being the holiest version of herself that she could be and is called to be. It didn't take very long for us to observe that call for public accountability had begun to be weaponized ideologically in the church. And what I mean by that is everybody wanted to find out about what the people they disagreed with were doing. You know what I mean? Everybody wanted to find out. Let's find out what the lefties are doing, or let's find out what those conservatives are doing. It was like we wanted this great scourge and wound in the church was quickly, and the evil one was doing this, weaponizing it to score party points, ideological points. And we wanted to see if there's a way that we could serve the church by providing that mechanism of public accountability without the pressure that often comes for, I think, a lot of institutions of big donors. We wanted to see if we could build something that would be funded by a lot of people who believed in the transmission of truth, but enough of them that editorial judgment wouldn't run the risk of being kind of framed by them. You know what I mean? And so we launched this project, and at the same time, most of our friends are parish priests, and we wanted to make sure that there was Catholic media for them, because a lot of times in Catholic media, like the coverage tends to be, secular media of the church tends to be like super ignorant of what the church actually is, and super kind of ideological of why the church is. I don't know what the church is, but I know she's wrong. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. Right. And then Catholic media can be sort of like, I don't really understand what the church is doing here, but I love it so much it must be right. You know what I mean? Or let me take the church's devotional life, which is good and important and central to my own life, and sort of make that news so that every third story you read is about the Shroud of Turin. And it's good to read some Shroud of Turin stories, but it's also good to know the church is a human society, and every human society is in need of real news coverage. So we wanted to see, could we make something for people who work in and around the church? And that's what we've been doing. And I hope it's changed in certain ways, and we're always sort of discerning what the Lord wants from us in it and where it goes. But I can see in that, I'm grateful that I can see in that a kind of line of providence that I wouldn't have seen myself. So, yeah.
I would just congratulate you and Ed on having, I think, hit that mark fairly well. And of course, I mean, it just is by the way of the nature of the church and the flow of time and history in which the church is always involved. That of course it's going to have to change and morph and pivot sometimes. But I have found it. I myself am also a former chancery employee. I ran our catechetical institute here in Phoenix.
So you know what I'm talking about.
So yeah, I've found it very helpful, actually.
Yeah, I'm glad.
As one of your target audience, not a parish priest.
But no, people who work in and around the church. I should have said that more broadly, because you're exactly
very helpful. Right. And I think the way you describe it is very much the way it reads when you engage the pillar. So yeah, keep up that good work. Where JD, where can folks find you? Where can they find the pillar? Where can they sign up?
Yeah, they can check out the Pillar at pillarcatholic.com. We have the Pillar podcast at wherever you get fine podcasts, including this one. I suspect we have Sunday School, which is our weekly readings podcast, where basically a scripture scholar teaches me what the weekly readings are about every single week, which is helpful because I don't know anything about them. And you can get that wherever you get podcasts, but pillarcatholic.com. And more important than that is the Heart of All Nations. I want to make sure that people know what I really want you to take away is the Heart of All Nations, which you can get from Ignatius Press or wherever you buy your books.
Lovely.
Fantastic.
Lovely. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure
you guys,
talking to you, and keep up the
thank
good
you.
work you're doing.
Yeah, it's really a gift to spend time with you. I hope we get a chance to see each other sometime.
Certainly.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Great.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
All right, dear listeners, stay right where you are. We will be right back here on Cradle and Convert. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Cradle and Convert. I am Steve Green, Director of Holy Family Institute of Catholic Faith and Life, host of the Reasonably Rational YouTube podcast, Cradle Catholic, and my lovely wife, Becky, the convert. And that was a very enjoyable conversation with J.D. Flynn. I anticipated it was going to be because
he's one of those smart guys.
He's a very intelligent guy. He's an excellent writer. I think you pick up on, he's got a pretty good grasp of the English language there just based on our conversation with him. But for those, again, I would just encourage people, first of all, go get the book, The Heart of All Nations. That's the Pier Battista Cardinal Pizzaballa there on the cover. Very actually, as is often the case, like how my brain took a vacation in the middle of that sentence, as is often the case, it's difficult to read these books cover to cover because we get a bunch of them. Praise God, love it, great, and we'll have lots of more great guests coming up here on Cradle and Convert. So I end up skimming a lot of them, but this is nifty because it's every chapter is just like a separate presentation or essay, so it's kind of a skimmable or hop around book anyway. But I've really enjoyed it. His reflections on just the Christian life, on suffering, on living a witness, are obviously colored by the reality of being entrusted with the church in Jerusalem, which is definitely a persecuted church. Just kind of beautiful stuff. Anyway, so I'd recommend getting that, and then check out the Pillar. You'll be glad you did. It's really good Catholic journalism, very balanced. As JD was talking about, like they strive to not have it come from a particular side or version of Catholicism, but just kind of be objective reporting. But they're clever, they're funny. They also throw in just kind of fun, like little quirky news items as well that are enjoyable. So yeah, check out the Pillar.
All right.
Hey, thanks as always for joining Cradle and Convert. Remember, the church has what the world needs, so learn your faith, live your faith, and share your faith. Until next time, God bless.